So you probably think of DNA as the blueprint of life, right? The code that makes you you. But what if that's only half the story? What if its real power isn't just about creating life, but about creating a whole new kind of computer? Yeah, you heard that right. Scientists are now looking at DNA's incredible potential to build a computer so tiny it could actually work inside one of your cells. So just forget about silicon chips and circuit boards for a second. I want you to imagine a computer that's so small, so biologically friendly that it could just patrol your body, finding and fixing diseases from the inside. Now, this isn't some far-off science fiction plot. This is the very real future of computing, and it all starts with the code of life itself. Okay, so how do we even begin to build a computer out of DNA? Well, before we get to that, we have to really appreciate what an absolute masterpiece of information storage it already is. Let's start with the basics. At its most basic level, DNA is an information molecule. It's this long, double-stranded thing that carries all the instructions needed to build and run a living organism, whether that's a tiny little bacterium or, you and me. So how much information are we really talking about here? Well, the human genome, that's our complete set of DNA, it contains 3.2 billion base pairs. You can think of those like individual letters in a gigantic instruction manual. I mean, that's just a truly mind-boggling amount of data. And get this, here's a fact that is genuinely hard to wrap your head around. If you could take the DNA from just one of your cells and stretch it out end to end, it would be about 2 meters long. 2 meters. All of that is packed into a cell nucleus that's only 6 micrometers across. Just think about that data density for a second. It is a marvel of natural engineering, packing this huge library into a space you can't even see. Okay, so how does DNA manage to store all this information so reliably? Well, it's all about how those two strands are held together. They're connected by pairs of chemical bases. A always pairs with T, and G always pairs with C. It's a perfect match every time. And that means one strand is basically a backup copy for the other. It's this built-in error correction system that nature perfected like billions of years ago. Right, so it's not just some static hard drive sitting there. DNA is part of an active, dynamic system. In fact, you could say every living cell is already a tiny computer, constantly reading its own DNA to make decisions. And a classic example of this is found in the humble E. coli bacterium. Let's take E. coli, for example. It's got a gene that lets it produce an enzyme to digest lactose. Now, if there's no lactose around, the cell is smart. It switches that gene off to save energy. But the moment lactose shows up, it acts like a signal that just flips the switch on. The cell reads its DNA, starts making the enzyme, and gets to work. It's a simple input-output calculation, really. It's a biological logic gate. Alright, so we've established that cells can compute by reading the biological code in their DNA. But this is where the story takes a really radical turn. Scientists started thinking, what if we could go beyond that? What if we could harness DNA's physical properties instead of just its biological ones? And this right here, this is the key question that changed everything. If DNA can process information inside a cell, could we actually use its physical structure to build our own technology? Could we, I don't know, make a wire out of DNA? And this is exactly what they did. This was the first step. Researchers managed to suspend a single strand of DNA between two tiny nanoscale gold electrodes. They literally turned it into a component in an electrical circuit. But there was a catch. On its own, DNA is actually a pretty terrible conductor of electricity. Okay, quick high school physics refresher. A conductor, like a copper wire, lets electricity flow super easily. An insulator, like rubber, stops it completely. But the real magic of modern electronics, that lies in semiconductors. These are materials where you can control the flow, turning it on and off. So for DNA to be useful, it had to become a much, much better semiconductor. Okay, now we're getting to the really cool part. Scientists weren't content just passing a current through DNA. They wanted to see if they could actually get it to perform logic, to, think and compute an answer. The first massive breakthrough came when they figured out how to crank up DNA's electrical properties. With some pretty clever chemistry, a research team managed to increase its ability to carry a charge by 3 orders of magnitude. We're talking 1,000-fold improvement. And they pulled it off with this surprisingly elegant little chemical trick. So how'd they do it? The solution was just beautiful in its simplicity. They took one of the 4 letters of DNA, adenine or A, and they just swapped it out for a slightly modified version they called Z. This tiny, tiny change created a much smoother path for electrons to zip along the molecule. And just like that, it went from being a lousy conductor to a pretty viable semiconductor. All right, so now we have a DNA wire that works. The next question is, can we make it think? Let's put it to the test with one of the oldest logic puzzles in the book. Here's premise one. All men are mortal. A simple universal truth, right? And premise number two, the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates is a man. So we've given our system two basic facts. So the question is simple. Based on those two facts we've just laid out, what's the logical conclusion? Is Socrates mortal? Of course, the answer is yes. But the amazing part is how a DNA computer figures this out. See, researchers created specific DNA strands for each part of the puzzle. When they mixed them all in a test tube, the Socrates strand would only stick to the man strand, which in turn would only stick to the mortal strand. The fact that this complete three-part molecule formed was the physical proof of a logical yes. The DNA didn't just store the facts, it actually computed the conclusion. I mean, solving ancient logic puzzles is cool and all, but the real end game here is so much more profound. This is about building autonomous computers that can work inside our bodies to heal us from the inside out. This is the vision. It's sometimes called the doctor in a cell. Just picture this, a biological computer floating around in your bloodstream. It's using molecular sensors to look for the specific mRNA signals that scream disease. It then computes a diagnosis. Is this cell cancerous or is it healthy? And if it detects a problem, boom, it releases a drug molecule to treat it right there on the spot. And this isn't just some abstract idea. Look at this. These are specific gene patterns for things like prostate and lung cancer. A DNA computer could be programmed to look for this exact combination of signals. If all the conditions are met, if it gets a yes, 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 it releases a drug. But if not, it does absolutely nothing. That means it leaves healthy cells completely alone, which could potentially get rid of the devastating side effects of treatments like chemo. This is the very definition of precision medicine. So let's be clear, the crucial point here is that DNA computers aren't going to replace your laptop. They're not going to be faster at running spreadsheets, but as this quote sums it up perfectly, their unique power lies somewhere else entirely. Their advantage is that they can operate in the wet, messy, complex environment of the human body, making life or death decisions one single cell at a time. It's a total paradigm shift. It's a complete rethinking of what a computer even is, moving it from our desks and putting it right into our biology, completely redefining the future of medicine.